Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. We're starting our weekend off right, and everything is for sale. For pricing on any of these watches, including the ones that are unlisted on our website, reach out to me directly at tmosso@thewatchbox.com. If you're interested in trading a watch toward a purchase, or you just wish to sell one watch or an entire collection, no upper limit on value paid. We pay cash, we pay fast, we make it easy. So to buy, trade, or sell, the same email address. Reach out to me directly at tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Okay, let's start with the watch I promised, in perhaps different condition and specification than you expected. You expected this watch on a strap. That was the thumbnail. Well, the watch does come with a strap, but this is a full set watch that includes the accessory bracelet as well. So you're getting the commemorative set that came with this first Omega in space. It's a watch modeled after the CK2998 personally owned chronograph that went into space, and I can even show you the date this happened because it's on the case back, in October of 1962. Again, this was before NASA adopted the Speedmaster Professional as a service-issued watch. This was a personally owned watch, and I think it was Sigma 7 it went up, and this watch is very true to that original. As you can see, alpha style hands. It features the conventional squared off lug, non-crown guard, non-shear guard, asymmetric profile. It doesn't have the lyre-style lugs. It's a more conventional and simple vintage-like lug profile. So this is a 39.7 millimeter steel case compared to 42 millimeters for the Speedmaster Professionals. We also have the vintage-style applique Omega logo on the dial, and then this is a luxury take on the Speedmaster. So the watch has a sapphire crystal rather than hesselite. You can also see it's not a Speedmaster Professional. It doesn't have that case profile. It also doesn't have that dial signature. So a very different type of watch. It would give birth to a couple of subsequent CK2998 editions, which were a little bit more whimsical and colorful. This one is more true to history. It's the kind of watch that would have been worn during the Mercury-Atlas program as a personally owned Omega. The bracelet is modern. You can see removable links fixed by screws. It has two little anchoring points for the bracelet, your micro adjust built in, single swing arm, twin trigger release, thick gauge steel used, and then inside Moonwatch caliber 1861 manual wind, cam lateral clutch, 48-hour power reserve, 21.6 beat rate, 18 joules, and Le Mans 1873 based. Throwing this watch on the wrist, you can see it's not quite as big as the Professional, though I will say this watch wears small when it is on the strap. On the bracelet, it feels almost the size of the newer watch because the bracelet geometry, especially the end-link to end-link distance of over 53 millimeters, is much more modern, whereas the lug-to-lug distance across this watch without the end links, it's only 47 millimeters. This is a watch that wears well on a smaller wrist when it's on its strap, which does come included with this one along with the strap tool. Wear it on the bracelet if you want a more modern, bolder look on a bigger wrist. Now, we're sticking with affordable watches. That's our theme for the open of the show. And right here you can see the Breitling Superocean limited edition. Now, this is a special piece, 42 millimeters in stainless steel, that gives you a lot of value for your money. Taking a quick look, you can see that the watch features a lovely satinated and brushed metallic applique on the dial. It is plenty loomed, no problems there. And the watch has a remarkable refinement that you're only going to see on the upscale Rolex divers, and that is a helium escape valve. You got to step up to a Sea Dweller if you want that on a Rolex dive watch. Not here. You can also see that unlike a Rolex, we don't have a Cyclops eye magnifier due to the exceptionally thick crystal necessary to achieve a 1,500 meter water resistance. You can also see that the timepiece features a 120 click bezel that is a captive bezel, so you can see these little screws in the side. Breitling builds its dive watches this way, and frankly, this is also how Sinn builds its watches. It's a very secure system, so the screws hold the bezel on. It cannot be snapped off by accident. There's an inlay of rubber within the bezel, and the watch has a automatic winding movement with a power reserve of 38 hours and a COSC chronometer certification, so it's the highest grade of ETA 28242, and then you've got stop seconds and a quick set date. Throw it on the wrist, it's an easy watch to wear. You can see it's got the Professional 3 style bracelet, so slash cuts with asymmetrically sized links. Throw it on the wrist. It's an easy one to wear, very comfortable, not that big by Breitling standards. It wears well on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. So if you want a Breitling that wears like a Rolex sub, especially now that the sub is 41 millimeters, this is a great way to do it. And a lot of folks believe that the turnaround plan at Breitling is finally working and really gaining traction. That's bringing up the values of older Breitling watches. No, it's not going to make you rich, but it has improved the image of the brand, which I think 5-6 years ago was dead in the water under Georges Kern. The turnaround is well and truly in progress. And I happen to prefer these modern style Superoceans with deeper diving capability, helium escape valves, and easier to read, bolder, more tightly calibrated bezels and dials. This is my style of Breitling watch. I'm not an aviator. I'm very much a dive watch fan. All right. Let's stick with our affordable watches, then we'll jump into some seriously heavy metal. Here's a diver of exceptional status and stature, despite not being very expensive. This is the Sinn U1, and when this was launched in the 2000s, the hook was that this was a modern take on the diving watch from Sinn Spezialuren of Frankfurt. A dive watch 44 millimeters in what's known as U-boat steel, or U-boat stahl. It uses a special, highly anti-corrosive media-blasted steel that I believe is provided by Böhm & Voss shipyards, and it's the same used on modern German U-boats. And you can see that it is a nice media-blasted profile. So what I like about media blasting is when it needs to be refinished, and you can see this watch does have some marks on it. A watch like this goes back to the factory, gets media blasted again because it's not finished by a brushing wheel of any kind. There's no need to brush it down and level the metal and remove metal when refinishing a media blasted surface. You just blast it again. U-boat steel, like Rolex 904L steel, is so resistant to corrosion that you don't need to rinse it after exposure to sea salt, and it's about 350 Vickers versus about 220 to 250 on conventional 316 steel. The bezel is tegament, which means the bezel itself is actually about 1500 Vickers, a much, much harder surfacing, and that carbon diffusion process creates a metallic base that's as tough as ceramic on its surface, so you're not going to get any scratches and scuffs on that bezel. 60 click, plenty of lume, and as I mentioned on the Breitling, we have captive bezel construction here with a bezel that's held on by screws. The watch has, and I'm just going to demonstrate this rather than saying it, absolutely no lack of Super LumiNova and distinctively profiled hands and indices with a large index in the bezel. We have an off-centered crown to make the watch ambidextrous, and then a wonderful silicone Sinn factory strap that, as you can see, is completely uncut. Take a quick look at the clasp. You can see it's a single swing arm, twin trigger release, and then we've got a fold-out dive extension. You have many increments to set this watch to the size of your wrist. We will cut it to size for you. Don't worry about having to do that yourself. Inside the case, ETA caliber, automatic, tough, hacking seconds, quick set date, reliable and hardy. And as you can see on the wrist, it's not as big as you might imagine. It's a fairly thin watch for its diameter and actually will fit underneath the jacket cuff, but it's got a wonderful solidity to it. And of course, in case you have any doubts, you can see on the reverse side, Deutsche U-Boat Stahl, the real thing. And this watch, the U1, was a breakthrough for Sinn. Previously noted for their pilot's watches, they became a name in dive watches thanks to this landmark machine. All right, speaking of dive watches, here's one of the most exotic divers you will ever see. Launched in 2014, the third in its series. This is the IWC Deep 3, part of the 2014 Aquatimer series, and that was the last time all the Aquatimers were redesigned at once. This was the third mechanical depth gauge built by IWC since the Deep 1 of 2009. The Deep 2 came out, or excuse me, the Deep 1 of 1999. Deep 2 came out in 2009. 2004 here, all titanium, grade 5, 46 millimeters in diameter. It has a mechanical depth gauge. So you can see I applied pressure to this diaphragm that reads down to 50 meters because they believe that is the limit for proficient amateur divers. The watch is actually water resistant down to 100, but it does two things. First, you can see that it shows me my instantaneous depth. It also marks my deepest depth, so if I need to do any decompression on my way up, I will note that I reached a depth that necessitates decompression, and then when I am done with that series of decompressions on my way to the surface, I can then reset the memory so I don't have to look at that. The watch, of course, features an ETA 2892 A2 automatic base, 42-hour power reserve. It has hacking seconds and a quick set date. No shortage of luminescence here either. As you can see, IWC makes the minute hand green so you can easily read it against the scale. Note that not only is the bezel loomed, but the entire dive scale which reads, my mistake, I apologize, down to 60 meters. That is fully luminescent, so you can read it in real time during the dive and be able to see what your max depth was during the period of the dive. Now, the watch features a safe dive system, which is essentially a unidirectional ratchet that is operated by ratcheting the bezel. So you can't turn it such that you would extend a dive. You can only shorten the dive. This is a bezel that offers you a good deal of safety, and to be perfectly frank, it's pretty much ideal for me because you can grip it easily when your hands might be wet, sweaty, or gloved, and being grade 5 titanium, this is both lighter than steel and more scratch resistant than steel. We also have quick releases underneath, so we have quick release here if you want to put it on a leather strap or a textile strap from IWC. It uses the same basic system that was developed in 2002 by fellow Richemont brand Cartier for the Roadster. A timepiece that's easy to wear. Once again, it says 60 meters on the dial, but it is water resistant down to 100, so if you want to have a little bit more reserve water resistance, this watch will give it to you. And the timepiece wears relatively flat for what it is, but make no mistake, you're going to wear this over a dive suit or outside of your sleeve. It's not going to disappear underneath the cuff. A wonderful piece, though, very cool, with huge tech appeal. Full set watch for sale here at Watchbox if you want a more exotic diver. Okay, from the world of aggressive sports watches, traditional valet de jour dress watches, and we've got a couple of spectacular ones here, starting with a model that came out in 2003, 41.5 millimeters in platinum. This is a 200-piece limited edition. It is the Master 8 Days Antoine LeCoultre, as built by Jaeger-LeCoultre. The watch was the first ever 8-day power reserve round watch from JLC, using a variation of the movement designed for the 70th anniversary reverso, the 70e. And in fact, though the watch is rated for 8 days, that's the chronometric power reserve, it will run for almost 10. The timepiece features a beefy platinum case that's just a little bit over 11 millimeters thick. There is some luminescence here, so though it's a dress watch, it does have a great degree of practicality to it. There's a day-night indicator, there's a 8-day power reserve indicator, there's a double-digit date. Longa actually took JLC's first patented double-digit date. It was a gesture of goodwill by executive Gunter Blumlein, who oversaw both companies inside of VDO before the Richemont sale. So JLC's second patented wristwatch double date went into the 70e and into this watch right here. Now, a standard version of this watch was made in steel, but this platinum model was an exceptional limited series. Not only does it have the limited numbering and the signature on the side, but you can see that the movement has also been engraved and then blue inked. The movement features Côte de Soleil radiating out from the center of the balance. So instead of parallel Geneva waves, we have this wonderful rich sunburst. All of the screws are fire blued. The watch does have hacking seconds. It does have a quick set date. It is a 4 hertz beat rate. So unlike a lot of long power reserve watches, JLC didn't put any gimmicks into this watch to achieve the 8-day power reserve. It still beats away at 8 beats per second, not the 6 beats per second or 5 beats per second from a lot of other long power reserve watches from this period. And the timepiece is easy to wear. It goes through the master 1,000 hours control, so you know it is both reliable and accurate. The timepiece features a full platinum clasp. Remember, pre-2006 JLC platinum watches featured platinum clasps. After 2006, they would feature white gold. Because this watch came out in 2003, it is platinum on platinum, and we have at the center of the dial half-frosted alpha-style hands with the half-frosting allowing the hands to be more legible against the dial base. Note that all the indices as well as the numerals are appliqué. This is a high-grade watch of the first order. It's a large watch for a dress watch, but only in terms of diameter. It's not terribly thick, and it's not excessively broad across the wrist. As you can see, it wears well on my wrist and easily flat enough to fit underneath the cuff. I wouldn't call it a unisex option, but it's definitely one for just about all male wrists. Okay. Now here's one I would consider a unisex option, and it's a very special watch. Launched last year, and I guess by last year I mean 2020, not 2021, in 500 pieces. This is the Audemars Piguet Remastered 01 chronograph based on the 1940s reference 1533. They made 9 of those, including 3 in a steel gold two-tone tandem. This one, 40 millimeters in steel and rose gold, is a lovely tribute to the vintage timepiece, but it has a couple of upgrades you won't find on the original 1533, and one of them being the fact that this is a flyback chronograph. Now, I gotta wind it a little bit if you want the flyback feature to actually restart after you reset it, but this is a watch that is automatic winding with a 70-hour power reserve, a flyback chronograph. The chronograph features both column wheel and vertical clutch, so it is a very modern arrangement. You can see on the reverse side, the column wheel is visible and black polished. The rotor features beveling, sunburst strakes, and then outside the brushed sunburst, you can see there's a pyramide, a sort of hobnail cut with little pyramids made in gold, ceramic rotor bearings. We have a sports watch style architecture with a full balance bridge and a free sprung index. Unlike the old modular chronograph 3126 with the 3840 module, this is an integrated chronograph and has a modern high beat rate of 8 beats per second. This caliber 4409, a variant of the movement that first debuted on the Code 1159. As you can see, you can just reset and restart the chrono with a single push of the trigger. We have lovely Corne de Vache style lugs, somewhere between a teardrop and a cow's horn, but they are absolutely gorgeous. That's the kind of lug style that made mid-century dress watches so mesmerizing to the modern collector's eye. They're soulful, they're graceful, and this watch has a lot of that. You can see that the dial is quite true to history with the vintage AP logo and then minimal printing. Everything is transferred to the dial. There are no appliques here because you wouldn't have seen that in the 1940s. We have sunken sub-registers, including one for the minutes that features a 45 marker because the then chieftain of Audemars Piguet was a big football fan, and so 45 marks the halfway mark of a match. So that's there for purely emotional Audemars Piguet family-inspired reasons. Now, the hands are either rose gold and beautifully executed with lovely rounded hand-finished baton for the hours and minutes, or they are fired blued steel for the chronograph components. We have a lovely vintage Art Deco Arabic numeral 12 that's taller than it is broad, and an outboard tachymeter scale. And once again, this is a 70-hour power reserve and a 500-piece limited edition, simple, vintage-inspired pin buckle. This might be my favorite watch on the show today, and there are only a handful that can contend with it. A really special piece that gives you the spirit of the past, but with modern fit finish and technical capability. And this is a vertical clutch, so if you just want to leave the chronograph running full-time, you can do that. And if I could point out one detail that I absolutely adore, it's that the watch doesn't have a conventional sunburst to its dial. It's actually a vertical graining that hangs down like a curtain brushed from top to bottom. A very, very special piece and a reminder of what made AP part of the Holy Trinity. That was official long before the Royal Oak. It was great dress watches and proficiency in complicated watchmaking that made AP the peer of Vacheron and Patek during its heyday. It's still one of the best watches made by AP today. All right. We have a threesome coming up, including one that's either going to be very cool, ironic, or bizarre, depending on your opinion. Let's start with the crowd pleaser. Okay, first things first, black dial, platinum case, 40 millimeters. This is the FP Journe Centigraphe Souverain Black Label, a watch available exclusively to customers of FP Journe factory boutiques, and then only to those who have previously bought new watches at factory boutiques, and then only about 2 examples per model can be made black label each year, so these are always scarce. A lovely off-white or cream printing for the features of the dial, the marquee, the numerals, the railroad track. It's not white, it's off-white, which makes it beautiful. We have 3 tachymeters, so you can gauge the speed of objects traveling between 6 and 36,000 kilometers per hour. We have a system that looks like a mono pusher, but you can stop it and restart it, just like you would with a twin pusher. This rocker is actually one of the patented features of the watch, Centigraphe, as it can measure 1/100th of a second. We have a 1-second foudroyant, we have a 20-second dial, and then a 10-minute dial. All of that driven by caliber 1506, which is 18-karat solid gold. With the chronograph off, it runs for 80 hours. Chronograph on, it runs for 24. But remember, the biggest register on the chronograph is 10 minutes, so you don't need to run it full time. The barrel is at the center. The second patented element of the watch, you drive the time-telling functions off the toothed edge of the barrel. That drives one drivetrain. And then the arbor, or the axle of the barrel, drives the chronograph. And that allows the watch to maintain constant balance amplitude, despite the fact that a complication has been activated when the chronograph is in motion. The watch has a lot of weight to it, being platinum with a rose gold movement. You can really feel the heft of this thing. And on the wrist, it's one of the sportiest looking dress watches that FP Journe makes. A personal favorite of mine, just because it does have such an animal magnetism to it, and it's very dynamic with those 3 registers moving, visible to the eye. It's also thin enough to fit underneath the dress cuff, so you can definitely dress this down. You can also dress it up. Okay, now, this is the one that you're going to find weird, very cool, or perhaps a little bit ironic. So, this watch was made in 2010 to mark the opening of the 6th global FP Journe factory boutique, which was in China. And it was also the first mainland China store for FP Journe. So, we have this lovely China 2010. There's a little bit of glue from a sticker on there, I apologize. But we have the China 2010 Tourbillon Souverain, a 5-piece limited edition featuring the colors of the Chinese flag as well as the 5 stars representing the 5 traditional regions of China. Other than that, it is a conventional Tourbillon Souverain with one exception. It does feature an optional full platinum deploying clasp, a feature generally only optional on the Tourbillon Souverain. It's deadbeat seconds, but you can see that since we're towards the end of the power reserve, the watch deactivates the remontoire, the constant force device, after 28 hours. But when you wind it back up, and it has a 42-hour total power reserve, for the first 28 hours of operation, you can see you have a deadbeat seconds indicator because the constant force spring on the reverse side, you can see the underlying mechanism is black polished, but we have this linear titanium spring, and so the barrel charges up that spring, which then slips and applies energy each second to the escapement, allowing this watch to maintain constant balance amplitude for the 28 hours that the remontoire is operating, which allows it to be adjusted very precisely. Now you can see black polished steel on the dial. The tourbillon cage has a fully black polished top and a filigree or wire-style structure. So it's a wire-style cage that moves in 1-minute cycles, free-sprung with an overcoil. The overcoil is rare on Journe watches. You only see it on some prestige pieces like the Chronomet Optimum or the Tourbillon Souverain. It makes the watch a better timekeeper in different positions. And we have a fully rounded and black polished half bridge for the tourbillon. 18-karat rose gold bridges and plates. The Tourbillon Souverain came out in 2004, and that year it won the GPHG Aiguille d'Or, or the effective Best Picture prize at the Oscars of watchmaking. This was the best watch of the year, the Tourbillon Souverain, back in 2004. You will be hard-pressed to find another example of the China 2010 model. It's a very cool piece, and if you're in mainland China, you can show your performative patriotism with a platinum tourbillon. Ironic? Yes. But then again, most luxury watches are at some level. If you want something a little bit more conventional, we have this right here, just as rare, 5 pieces for the Milan-based retailer Orologeria Pisa. This is the Pisa limited edition, and very little has been changed from the stock watch. It has nickel anthracite registers for the deadbeat seconds sub-register and the hours and the minutes over at 3 o'clock. So again, we'll just wind this up a little bit more, and you can see it reverts to its deadbeat seconds function. The dial here is made of white gold and media blast, and once you can, again, you can see that the same level of finish is applied. This one's a little bit older. This came out in 2008 in 5 pieces, and so you can see it's still one of the French-made Eleanor cases, as we have the French hallmarks and the Eleanor maker's mark right there, and then next to it we have the Swiss hallmark. So right up until about mid-2008, cases would have been made in France and delivered to FP Journe, which is why they would have featured a maker's mark that was not his, and the hallmark of a second nation. Now this watch features a conventional pin buckle, and it features a lovely olive green factory strap from FP Journe. This is also a 40mm watch in platinum, just like the last 2 you saw, and again, rarity, but with a bit more discretion. This one's not quite as revolutionary as the Chinese tourbillon, but it wears just as nicely. All right, let's take a quick look at a couple of oversized sports watches, starting with one of the most overlooked sports complications in the business. The first models came out as a limited edition 500 rose, 500 platinum in 2010. In 2012, Ulysse Nardin launched this blue ceramic and rose gold version of the El Toro Perpetual. Lots to love. First, it is a chronometer, certified with the COSC. Second, it features ceramic garnishing on the push registers for the time, an individual numbering plate like a vintage Ulysse Nardin marine chronometer, a ceramic bezel with a 24-hour scale for the second time zone, and a lovely double knurled crown with polymer inserts, and a bidirectional quickset for its perpetual calendar. It is a COSC certified Swiss chronometer, 100 meters water resistant, a bidirectionally settable perpetual calendar, and a GMT with 12 and 24-hour time displays. It is all of that in one. It has dial side screws, dial side Geneva waves with a dark rhodium or ruthenium coating to make them handsome and gray. Now, if you take a close look, you can see this is a very comprehensive perpetual calendar, as it gives us a double-digit date, it gives us a day, it gives us a month, it gives us a year, and it gives us a decade. And again, you can set it using the crown in both directions. This may be the most user-friendly perpetual calendar in the world. In the year 2100, it does not need to go back to the factory. Because this is a sports watch, and let me fix my lights here. Now we're back in business. But because this is a sports watch and it's water resistant and automatic winding, it is also very well loomed. So this is a versatile piece, 43 millimeters in diameter. It uses the Ulysse Nardin caliber 32 base, which is distantly LeMans based, but they use their own magic lever bidirectional pawl-based winding system. We have a handsome rusticated, partially engraved white gold mass with a lacquered insert featuring the Ulysse Nardin anchor. As you can see, we have circular Côte de Genève blued screws. It's a good-looking movement and has a 48-hour automatic winding power reserve. I mentioned a perpetual calendar, but I also mentioned its chronometer with 2 time zones, and we have these plus-minus adjusters that were developed by Ludwig Axelin, the watchmaker genius of Ulysse Nardin in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. He designed this system back in 1994 for the San Marco dual times. So it's a pusher adjuster system that allows you to drive the hour hand in either direction. Note that the hour hands are beautifully matte finished. It's a handsome watch with a deep Rayhaut outboard and many applied elements on the dial, including this crossed T-like structure that resembles the head of a bull, hence the nickname El Toro for the model. It also includes a ceramic clasp with titanium internals and push-button release, so a lot to love about this watch. Okay, another crazy one, a little bit more mainstream here, 42 millimeters in rose gold, second generation Vacheron Constantin overseas chronograph, a real good-looking watch that uses a brown rubber strap so you can avail yourself of its 150-meter water resistance. It's also 25,000 ampere per meter anti-magnetic. It's powered by a Frédéric Piguet 1185, which is a thin, fine, nicely decorated and well-tuned column wheel vertical clutch chronograph, automatic winding with a 40-hour power reserve. The watch is definitely the second generation overseas to own. I think the third generation overseas is at its best as the standard self-winding automatic. I think the second generation watch looks best as a chronograph, and because the third generation doesn't feature the double-digit date or the big date of the second and first generation chronos, a lot of folks think this was the best looking chrono because it had the big eye asymmetrical dial with the larger minutes register for the chronograph that you didn't see on the original watch from 1999, the first generation chrono. And the third generation chrono doesn't have the big date. We have screw down pushers. The watch features a crisp column wheel action. The Frédéric Piguet is made by manufacturer Blancpain. And so in case you're wondering who Frédéric Piguet is, they're a long-standing fine movement manufacturer in the high horology space that makes movements for Blancpain exclusively today. And as you can see, we have a Frédéric Piguet movement in here. I'm not going to say exclusively. They do still sell some 1185 movements and 1150 movements, but Vacheron has ceased using Piguet movements as of 2016, so these are discontinued and much sought. They're also easy watches to wear. As you can see, it's more of a tonneau case than a round case, so the edges of the case arc down and around the edge of the wrist. A real special watch that feels as good as it looks, and it's only 12.5 millimeters thick, so it sits low on the wrist. Okay, we're going to talk about steel dress watches, starting with this one that came out in 2015. Chopard L.U.C XPS orange dial, 39.5 millimeters steel case that's only 7.4 millimeters thick. And you can see that if we can get close enough, I'm not sure how well you're resolving the dial details, but the sunburst on the dial radiates out from the name rather than from below the hand. So it radiates out from the marquee up at 12 o'clock. Orange dial, metallic, polished applique indices, and faceted Dauphine-style hands, super slim at 7.4 millimeters thick despite being automatic winding. And then you can see the movement right here is a manufacturer caliber with a 22-karat gold micro rotor. The movement is nicely hand-finished. It has a 65-hour power reserve and hacking seconds. It is a very special watch-adjusted chronometer style in 5 positions. When you throw it on the wrist, it disappears. It's a lively watch, make no mistake, with the orange dial and matching strap, but the Chopard manufacturer movement sits so low it disappears underneath the cuff. I'd also recommend it for men and women as it's suitable on wrists of just about any size, and it's sporty enough with all that color that you can wear it casually, but being as thin as it is and just 3 hands without a date, it's definitely a dress watch. Okay, here's a watch in steel that represents high horology and a viable competitor to the Ludwig Axelin perpetual calendar system. This is the H. Moser Cie Pioneer perpetual calendar, and it's got the burgundy dial. This is a 2019 50-piece limited edition, 42.8 millimeters in stainless steel with a 120-meter water resistance, so it's a real sports watch. It is plenty loomed, no issues there. And this is the date month, the perpetual calendar date month. And what makes that important is usually they have an index at the center, and the little stub index will point to the 12 months. 12 months corresponding to 12 hours. It's a very stealthy way of displaying a calendar indication, but a lot of folks have trouble reading it, or at least lining it up with the index. Here you can see I have a bidirectionally adjustable perpetual calendar. This was actually developed for Moser by Andreas Streller, who's one of the AHCI greats, truly one of the best independent watchmakers today. He's famous for designing stealth complications, or complications that hide their complexity. You can see how he achieves so large a date. There are actually two overlapping discs, and you can see them right here. If not for the overlapping discs, to get numerals this size, the watch would probably have to be 50 millimeters in diameter. I apologize for the little dog hair right there. We love our dogs here at Watchbox. Power reserve indicator. The watch is manual wind and rated for 7 days. In fact, it will run for almost 9. It does have hacking or stop seconds. You can see that the case flank is machined and then hand finished, given it these lovely recesses with coined profiles. And then on the reverse side, you can see that we have a watch that is beautifully hand done. We have 2 barrels sitting in a screw-fixed golden chaton, which is a nod to the pocket watch era of Moser watchmaking. You can also see that they make all the tough parts of the watch, not just the bridges and plates and the wheels, but the hairspring, the balance, and the escapement. And in this caliber 808, the escapement is made of solid gold, which reduces friction and extends power reserve. We also have an overcoil hairspring, and it's a sports watch-like architecture with a full balance bridge and then a free-sprung balance, which makes it quite tough. And Streller decided when he designed this perpetual calendar that he didn't need a leap year phase indicator on the dial. It's rarely necessary to reference it. When you need to, you can hide it on the reverse side. So we have a leap year phase indicator on the reverse side rather than on the front. On the front, it wouldn't really be necessary. There's a little pusher adjuster on the side, so you can adjust the leap year if you wish. And then on the wrist, I'd recommend it for a wrist of 15 centimeters circumference or larger. Once again, my wrist is 16 centimeters circumference, and this wears well, but I wouldn't want to go too much smaller. One of the best features of the watch, let's not overlook it, it is Moser's famous fume fade, from light at the center to dark at the edge, and this is a sunburst pattern with a gloss lacquer applied to make it look a shiny burgundy color. Sticking with our steel, here is a steel perpetual calendar. This is the perpetual twin from Chopard. It's one of their L.U. Chopard manufacture movements. This model, 43 millimeters in steel, but only 11.1 millimeters thick. It came out in 2020. It's got a blue metallic sunburst dial, and although it is a dress watch, you can see that like several other dress watches we've experienced today, this one's fairly sporty with a steel case and a loomed dial. We have dart-style indices, which are faceted and polished. We have a double-digit date. We have a perpetual calendar indicator, and as you can see, the watch features a leap year phase. It includes the months, it includes seconds with hacking, and it includes the days. The timepiece features a gorgeous manufacturer movement, and this one is COSC chronometer certified. So once again, we have the micro rotor. Once again, we have the 22-karat winding mass with a guilloche cut. Once again, we have a 65-hour power reserve, and it is beautifully executed and adjusted in 5 positions. You can see that the beveling is handsome, the engine turning is sharply overlapped, the Côte de Genève are the real deal, laid down abrasively and not stamped. Altogether, an attractive movement inside a watch that is surprisingly versatile for a dress complication. It has a wonderful nubuck-style suede leather. And then on the wrist, it's broad and flat. I think you need a wrist at least my size to wear this, because at 43 it is a big dress watch, though you can see it is not very thick, but it is comfortable. I think you need that 16 centimeter circumference wrist or larger to wear this well. And as you can see, the case flank is nicely detailed with a combination of polished accents and then vertical satin finish, which is rarely seen on case bands. Altogether, a great looking watch. Now we have 2 spectacular pieces. One, the Saxonia with the outsized date, or the big date. This watch, as you see it here, 38.5 millimeters in rose gold with a black dial, came out in 2018. The dial is black galvanized sterling silver, and then we have a double-digit date with a lovely vintage font. The typeface is gorgeous. The feel and the sound of operating the pusher is comparable to a fine column wheel chronograph, like, say, a dotograph. The watch also features hacking or stop seconds. And on the reverse side, Lange manufacture caliber L0868. So we have German silver bridges and plates with the copper in the German silver matrix, giving it that golden hue. We have a freehand engraved balance cock, a black polished escape wheel cover, black polished case clamp screws, black polished locating pegs for the bridges, and then a black polished swan's neck. But we also have fired blued screws. The watch includes both. Again, notice that the balance cock is fully engraved underneath the swan's neck regulator. That's done by hand, not with a lathe. You can see that the edge of the bridges are mirror polished, and the rotor includes not a tungsten mass, not a gold mass, but a platinum mass to maximize its winding efficiency, and it pivots on ceramic bearings for low maintenance and high efficiency. We have a rotor internal. You can see the outer mass is platinum, but the rotor itself features mirrored beveling, satination, and then a chiseled profile in its recesses. It's also held to the platinum mass by blued screws, all of this with a 72-hour, 3-day power reserve. The watch includes a simple pin buckle, as most Lange watches do. We'll throw it on my wrist, take a quick look. I can recommend this for men and women because the size is easily compatible with a smaller wrist. I think you could wear this watch on a wrist as small as 13 centimeters in circumference. So a unisex option, yes, but also an option for those who prefer more discreet watches. And in this day and age of occasionally criminal chaos on the streets, it might be a good thing to wear a watch that can hide underneath a cuff. All right. The big piece, or at least the big piece for this episode, something I've never seen in person before. This is the 101001. If that doesn't mean anything to you, this is the one, the Lange one, the first one. The model as released in October of 1994, one of the first 4 modern Lange und Söhne timepieces, along with the Arcade de Saxonia and the Pour le Mérite Tourbillon. This is the only one of them that is still in production in nearly its original form. 38.5 millimeters in yellow gold. It has a dial that is white galvanized sterling silver. The geometry of the features of the dial carefully determined by their mathematical relationships to each other, including golden sectioning. Now take a quick look. You can see there is an up-down power reserve indicator. The watch has 2 barrels and a 72-hour power reserve. It also has stop seconds. It also has a quick set system for the big date, but what sets this watch apart is that it was made in the first year or so of production. As we know, the watches came out in late 1994, and for just a bit over a year, they would have featured a solid case back. Now, I can tell you this is one of the earliest examples because it features a hallmark on the reverse side that is the pre-August 1st, 1995 Swiss hallmark. So after August 1st, 1995, Swiss hallmarks changed over to the little dog, the little St. Bernard's head, with the St. Bernard's head and then a letter representing the assay office that punched the hallmark. You can see that little thing that looks like a diamond. That is a dog's head. That is the post-August 1st, 1995 hallmark. It's been used ever since on precious metal. Well, here we have the Helvetic head. And if you're wondering why a Swiss precious metal hallmark is on a German watch, it's because then as now, Lange outsources its case construction, and then as now, most of that case construction is still done in Switzerland. So the movement and the dial and the watch are amongst the earliest because at the very least, we know that the case was made prior to August 1st, 1995, and it is a solid case back. Super rare, super scarce, immensely collectible, and to be frank, a little bit thinner than the subsequent Lange ones. Collectors go nuts over these because they are so hard to find. It's very rare to find one in its original form, as in the intervening decades, many of these have been retrofitted with sapphire casebacks, which is a travesty because the Germans, typically modest, thought that fine finishing should be there for your watchmaker to appreciate. So while it may seem a little bit difficult to understand the mentality of the 90s, it was one of integrity and modesty. Modesty because you didn't show off, and integrity because the fine finish was in there in the caliber L901, but only there for other professionals in the watch industry to see at the time of service. Now the Lange one hasn't changed a whole lot. Its last major redesign was in 2015, and the size of the standard Lange one did not change. So this watch still cuts a striking figure on the wrist, as modern today as it looked back in 1994, the first take on what a modern era German high luxury wristwatch should look like. And again, it's almost indistinguishable from a 2022 Lange one of the same size. Very special pieces, all of them collectible, but appealing to different tastes each. Reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and especially pricing details, including of the watches like that Lange not yet listed on our website. Time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.